Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Living on Purpose, the show about intentionally crafting the happy, successful life you deserve. I'm your host, Mark Barton, author of the Living on Purpose course, and owner of Bought In for the Win LLC, specialist in all things coaching, consulting, and training and development. If something in this episode resonates with you, please connect with me to discuss how I might bring some positive growth to you or your organization. To my regular viewers, I apologize for no episode last week. It was a jam-packed week, and I wanted to make sure I had time to give due diligence to the content provided by my special interviewee. Huge shout out to Mrs. Courtney Lundy, principal at Satellite High School, and I am so appreciative of your time and would love to have you be a contributor anytime. Courtney provided some great insight for both the organizational and leadership levels into this week's topic, and I'm excited to share them with you. So, let's get on with the show. During the last episode, we discussed developing goals, specifically how to craft SMART goals. But this week, Courtney and I discussed building accountability. I knew she was going to be a great interview for the show, but her answers and insights on this topic were so in line with what I teach that you would swear she had already taken the Living on Purpose course. I was blown away at how much she practices putting values first in her accountability systems for both her organization and herself as a leader. Before I share her shining examples on those two areas, I want to share a recent personal example of having to exercise my own accountability system. For this week's personal level example of building accountability, I'd like to share my unfortunate story about having to fire my home warranty company. In the interest of time, I won't go into all the lengthy background details, but I would like to set the scene a little bit. So, a pool pump went out recently, and this is an item that's covered under my home warranty contract through American Home Shield. I called in to have the repair scheduled, paid the service fee, they put me in contact with their assigned repair company, and we got it scheduled. Now, the person they sent out to my house was there for maybe less than 15 minutes, did not actually repair anything, but left saying that he would contact his boss and have them let American Home Shield know that it would be paid out for replacement. I thought the problem was solved. A little over a week went by, and I called American Home Shield to find out what was going on and was told the repairman's service comments said there was nothing wrong with the pump, it was the filter, and no service was required. I explained this was absolutely not the case, but they suggested I have a recall for service, even though I was a little reluctant to have the same company come back out. They called me to schedule, but because they're not local to my area, they couldn't let me know of a time anywhere in the near future they could actually be able to come out. I called and reported this back to American Home Shield and asked that it be reassigned to a different company. After some back and forth, the only company they could find was even farther away, and when I contacted that company, they informed me they didn't actually do pool pump repair anymore and had told American Home Shield this many times. So this led to some more back and forth phone calls, at which point I ultimately had to tell American Home Shield that, per the contract, which I don't like to do that, but it's true, I'm entitled to a second opinion, but you don't have anyone who can provide that, so I'm going to give you 3 business days to resolve the issue. Long story short, the 3 business days came and went, and of course, nothing got resolved. I called them to let them know they'd no longer be my home warranty provider. I wanted to cancel the remainder of my contract and be given the prorated refund for the unused portion, also per the contract. However, they refused. After several heated conversations with multiple representatives, I decided this was no longer worth my time, effort, and energy, certainly not for the minimal amount of I was going to be refunded. I decided that simply firing them and moving on to a different company was suitable enough accountability for me in this instance. I did contemplate filing a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. However, after reviewing how many thousands of other complaints were already there and seeing some of the lack of resolution others had gotten, I just decided it wasn't really worth it, and taking my business elsewhere would have to be good enough. In this story, there are 2 cases of accountability. The first is me holding a company accountable to the agreed upon terms of a binding business contract, and the second is me holding myself accountable to my own values. In the first case, I would personally want to hold them to the maximum allowable level of accountability, all the way up to and including arbitration, and potentially some follow-on in public forums such as the Better Business Bureau like I mentioned. However, going through with all that and the time, effort, energy, and aggravation that it would have required of me would be a violation of my own values. This brings me to the second case of accountability where I had to analyze which value was more important in this situation, fairness and justice or problem solving in progress. In the end, I wisely chose problem solving in progress and bought a new pump myself. I made fairness and justice be secondary by simply taking my business elsewhere, so I didn't compromise those values. All right, enough about my little tiff with the home warranty company and holding both them and myself accountable to my values. Let's get to some of Mrs. Lundy's examples, starting with the organizational level. As I've explained a few times in this segment of the show, a strong organization is one where the values of the collective are representative of the values of the individuals and one that forms a mutually supportive relationship between the two. After talking with Mrs. Lundy last week, I can tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt, this is exactly the kind of organization she's building at Satellite High School. But because my wife works there and my son graduated there last year, I already knew this. I wanted to interview her to find out how she was doing it. One of the first questions I asked her was, what does accountability look like in your organization? She explained that, as one might expect, initial forms of accountability come from various policies that guide and govern our education system. This includes state and federal laws, the Professional Educator Code of Ethics, school district policies, and the policies and practices she implements at the school level. We talked about how sometimes, particularly in education, all these different layers of policies can push or pull not only an organization, but also the individuals in many different directions and sometimes even conflict with each other. So I asked her how she handles that within her organization. For Courtney, and honestly, this is a good example for everyone, she leans on her values that led her to a career in education in the first place to take care of the kids. To make sure that the organization as a whole remains accountable to not only the policies, but also their mission, she explained how important it is to provide support to all the stakeholders so each of them understands how their individual piece of accountability is in support of the overall organizational goals. One of the key phrases she used is "we here at Satellite" as she talked about interpreting organizational policies in a way that people can understand what's in it for us, the collective. One of the second questions I asked was how does she create systems of accountability? It was no surprise when she answered with another "we" response. She said one of the key things she does is having regular meetings to assess specific progress in their annual school improvement plan, which at Satellite focuses on building a positive school identity and culture based on positive behaviors. Regardless of what new or continuing initiatives are up for discussion, the monitoring and measuring mechanism is always how does this contribute to the we, or how is this improving our culture here at Satellite? The school improvement plan is serving as an accountability tool to ensure everyone in the organization, students, teachers, parents, support staff, and administrators alike, are all making decisions that contribute to developing this positive culture. Or as I said, they're building a culture around building a culture. I asked Courtney if she could give me a practical example of this, and she explained it means a lot to a custodian when they see an administrator picking up trash, but we do it because it's just the right thing to do. It's part of the culture we're developing. Cultural norms is one of the strongest forms of organizational accountability, especially when everyone is bought into the common value set. But Courtney had some great examples for holding leaders accountable as well. Maintaining accountability as a leader is extremely simple and simultaneously extremely difficult. It's simple because all it requires is asking the question, am I making decisions that are in the best interest of the people and organizations I lead? And making sure the answer is always yes. It's extremely difficult because making these kinds of decisions is often a delicate balance of a variety of factors, including mission accomplishment, health and welfare of your subordinates, and long-term strategic organizational development, just to name a few. When I asked Courtney how she builds leadership accountability, it was again, no surprise, she accounted for all of those kinds of factors as well. One of the key components she mentioned in building accountability for herself as a leader is to pull from others. She mentioned some of the positive leaders she's had in her career and uses their successful examples as a guide. The second thing she mentioned was focusing on vision and mission, but through a lens of values grounding. This is a fantastic example because one of the quickest ways we lose our accountability as a leader is when we hyper-focus on the mission without proper regard for the organizational values. Or, more simply put, you might be wildly successful, but there won't be anybody there to clap for you. Courtney had an outstanding example of how to maintain values grounding while focusing on mission and vision. She has her target goals for the year written right there on the dry erase board in her office, which is not uncommon, but rather than being arbitrary goal statements, they're divided into 4 values-based categories with objectives to supporting those values. It serves as an accountability tool because it's right there on the wall in her office and she looks at it every day. but it's also in alignment with the school improvement plan and all the things she has the whole organization working towards. So it serves as an accountability tool in a much bigger capacity as well. One of the final questions I asked Courtney is, what's the hardest thing to stay accountable to? Her answer is something I consider to be one of the hallmarks of good leadership, and I've mentioned it many times here. She said, it's when the have to accountability outweighs your personal values. What she's talking about is the difficult decisions I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, where we as leaders have to make certain decisions or implement certain policies, even when we don't like them, don't agree with them, or they conflict with our own personal values. Her targeted goals board is a great example of this. It's a set of values-based targeted goals for the organization. And although her personal values do align with it, because in my professional opinion, she's the right person leading the right organization, it's still not called Courtney's Thoughts and Opinions board. It's a reflection of the collective she leads, not just herself. Again, a hallmark of great leadership. Thanks for joining me this week, and I hope you gained some insight into the importance of values in developing accountability. If the values aren't at the forefront, then what are you even holding yourself or your organization accountable to? It doesn't matter if you're deciding who to give your business to, or how to grow a positive school culture, or making sure you literally and figuratively stand in front of the goals you're leading others towards. None of it will matter, and you won't feel good even if you succeed if the right values aren't present. Invest some time this week to make sure you have sound accountability practices in your life and the right values are driving them. Because if you aren't bought in, you sold out.